whatever your reasons are, you need to wrap your head around that and come to terms with, because that's the only thing that's going to motivate you when you're tired, cold, wet, hungry. You're injured, you're behind enemy lines. You have to have a strong why. You have to have a motivation. It's something that's going to, it's a will to live. Why are you living? What's your purpose?
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Casassa, the author of the upcoming memoir, Training with the SEAL. And today on our show, we have a retired Navy SEAL. He was a plank owner and original member of SEAL Team 3. He was also a BUDS instructor, and he served on SEAL Team 4 until 95, before transitioning to the SEAL Reserves and then officially retiring in 2011 as a Chief Warrant Officer. He has a doctorate as a chiropractor and today serves as the Navy SEAL Museum San Diego Operators Director and conducts adventure fundraising events for the Navy SEAL Museum in Fort Pierce, Florida. It's where I met him. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to Lance Cummings. Lance, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you. Last time we briefly met, you were we were at the Navy SEAL Museum in Fort Pierce, Florida. That was a really cool place. That was my first time there, and I absolutely loved it. And now you are putting together a museum over in San Diego, right?
Right. Yeah, we were in the middle of an event for Panerai watches when you and I met. Compliments of Hector Delgado.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was I think a 6-day event for the watch company. It was a Navy SEAL experience for a lot of people who buy Panerai watches. They actually leased the trademark from the Department of Defense in order to put out a Navy SEAL watch. And the people who buy these high dollar watches got a Navy SEAL experience tagged onto it. And they came from all over the world. And we put them through, I think, a 3-day mini heck week and gave them a little bit of an experience and something to take home. But yeah, now I'm in San Diego, and we're assembling all the artifacts and exhibits, and we have a building, we have an address, and we're very excited about opening up at the end of 2024 the Navy SEAL Museum San Diego.
That is amazing. I'm definitely going to have to swing by. That sounds like so much fun. I want to talk to you. Well, what you just said was, you put people through like a mini hell week, that little like 6-day.
It's not really hell. I call it gosh darn week. Or, it's not quite at that level, but right. They give a small taste of day one, maybe.
Yeah, in 6 days, which I find really interesting. It's they get a small taste of what your day one would be like, but over 6 days of time. So when you went into it in what, the 80s or the 90s? You went into the SEAL teams?
I entered the Navy in August 1981. And at that time, yeah, you actually had to do a year in the fleet before you could get orders for SEAL training and for BUDS training. So that was a very long year, but I actually used it to, I guess, position myself correctly and get in shape and get my head right. And went out to San Diego and entered BUDS training, class 124.
How old were you when you went into the fleet and then went into BUDS?
I was 22.
22. So what made you, because at that time, people didn't really know much about the SEALs, right? So what made you, how did you find out about it? How did you know you wanted to do it?
Well, my cousin actually told me a little bit about it. And he said, you can do all the stuff that we like to do growing up, except it's legal and you get a paycheck for it. So I did a little research, talked to a couple of recruiters and signed the papers, took some tests, signed the papers, and off I went.
Creating that self-discipline for yourself, was that something that was instilled in you in childhood? Was it something that you developed over time? Because for you to do a year in the fleet and keep your eye on the target and not move to to keeping with your training and everything so you would be as successful as possible at Buds, where did that come from?
I actually grew up on a horse farm, so we had 25 or 30 horses in my backyard. So I was introduced pretty early to a shovel and a rake and pitchfork and swinging and slinging hay bales in the summertime. And it was, I think, really good to have that discipline, to know that someone or something is counting on you, and if you're not there for them, then they're gonna starve or won't be taken care of. And I think that's a big part of it. Just having the discipline to be a team player, to get up every day, and you're gonna have to train and train your horse and feed your horse and care for them every day, 7 days a week, 24/7. So I think that's part of where it came from.
Did you get up at the same time every day or around the same time?
5 o'clock every morning, feeding horses, letting them out.
Seven
And then,
days a week?
yeah, 7 days a week, getting ready to go to school, and doing my best.
I'm sure there were moments where you're like, I don't want to get up. I want to stay in bed. How did you push past that? And was there a point where it was just like, this is it? Like, it's just like every day, like clockwork, and you just kind of like surrender to it and it just becomes your everyday norm?
Yeah, I think sometimes you have those periods, but my mom was on my ass with a belt if I wasn't up, and doing what I was supposed to do. I think that's something that may be lacking a little bit these days, but it definitely will get you past those weak moments when you don't want to do something, but you have to do it. A little
So,
bit of parental guidance helps.
how did you do without that parental guidance then in your early 20s? Because now you have this freedom to stay in bed if you choose. So how do you motivate yourself?
You got a job. I was working, going to school, junior college, kind of on the rudderless, I think. I was on the 4-year junior college program that I was just checking the block for that, and looking around and seeing, some of my friends were getting in trouble, going to jail, getting in drugs, things people that I knew that were good people that were just, I guess, victims of bad situations or bad decisions. And I decided that there was a lot more in the world for me, and I wanted to get out and see a lot more of it. And that the Navy seemed like a great way to do it. I had worked construction as well, so I was worked a demolition wagon, blowing up rocks and stuff for pipelines and scuba diving and things like that. So all those things were fun that I was doing as hobbies. That I looked at the SEAL occupation, and it's something that they did for work, and it seemed like a good fit.
How did you train for it? Did you know what to do, or you made up your own training regime and prayed for the best?
Well, I mean, you've got when you go into boot camp, you take a physical screening test, and it's running and swimming and push-ups and sit-ups. So I looked at that as, okay, that's going to be my guide for my training. So I continued to do that. And when I was at my first duty station in Groton, Connecticut, coldest winter I ever spent, coming from Georgia. There was the Coast Guard Academy was right across the street from the base where I was. So I just started going over to the Coast Guard Academy. They had martial arts classes. They had a huge pool, weight room, track, things like that. So that was, I mean, it seemed like it was ready made for what I was attempting to do and preparing for. And then I had the Navy divers had a barge that was right next to my small 130-foot ship that I was on. So I would go over there and touch base with those guys and hang out with them, and just basically pester them until they gave me some answers to some of the questions and that I was looking for. So that was a good guidance as well. And actually, one of the Navy divers who was stationed right next to me in Connecticut went to SEAL training ahead of me and was a couple of classes ahead of me. And I got to know him again and reunited after we both finished SEAL training.
When you went into Buds, how prepared were you?
I felt like I had a year journey and a year to prepare. So I felt like I was going to do everything every day that, they asked me to do and then give it my best. I felt like I had done my homework and I was ready. So I was fairly confident. And the only thing that could really hold me back was getting medically injured. Um, and that's something that I worked on every weekend, resting. And, I got Achilles tendonitis one time. So the next weekend I was down in Mexico looking for some veterinary supplements to, help out. And I think that I just looked at it as a very fun 6 months, so everything that we were doing and the camaraderie that was there, the people that you meet, I couldn't imagine finding a better group of guys and a better situation to go through as a young man than Bud's training.
Were you winter or summer?
I was a spring class. We started in March.
Okay.
The water's still nice and cool from January, February. It stays in I guess the high 50s, low 60s up until about July here. And then some of the Japanese currents come down the coast and warm it up a little bit.
Now, you said something about, you were as prepared as you did your homework, you were ready, and you also said that I looked at it as a fun 6 months. So did you always have that positive, I'm going to look at it like this? How did you develop that? Was it something that was in like I said, that you've always had? Was it you were negative and then turned positive?
I could look out there and see the ships leaving San Diego port, haze gray and underway. And I had been there for a year. So I knew if I didn't make it through Bud's training, I was going back to the fleet. And that's a great incentive. Every day you see the ships leaving port, and you could be on one of those, or you could be on the beach doing push-ups and rope climbs and an obstacle course. So the choice for me was obvious. I would much rather be there in a very small, tight, close-knit community of guys and working out and doing stuff and working toward a goal than being in the regular Navy. Not that there's anything wrong with that. We need that Navy. We work closely with the maritime forces now, but it just wasn't the place that I wanted to be. So that was my driving force.
Was there any area that you struggled with? What part of your body broke down during buds? How did you keep going?
Initially, I wasn't the fastest runner, so I would get some extra motivation in the goon squad. After I completed buds, I made a point to make that my strong point. So I started, running on my off time and every day and doing triathlons, and I just worked really hard on that. So when I came back through Bud's training 5 years later as an instructor, I would just volunteer to lead the runs and to I mean, actually that was one of my better tours of duty was as an instructor at Bud's, because I think the guys who I learned from, who were instructors when I was at Bud's training, were all Vietnam veterans, and they knew what it took, so they were not going to relax the standards. They were going to hold you accountable for your actions, and I think that was great. That's what every person needs, is to be held accountable. But and to answer your question, yeah, I struggled a little with the runs and stuff at first, but I was really strong in all the other areas. So I tried to prevent injury as much as possible, but stay healthy. And, I finished with my class.
Did you get injured at all?
I had some Achilles tendonitis, like from swims. We had these duck feet, swim fins that are like swimming with a 2x4 taped to your feet. They're very, very stiff. So I developed some tendonitis from that, and it impacted my run times and swim times. And I remember coming off a 2 mile swim and not even being able to straighten out my foot because my Achilles tendon was so inflamed, and was just struggling to walk up the beach after that. But again, I went down to Mexico, found some DMSO from veterinary liniment that would reduce inflammation, and then I got well. I got better.
How'd you just know? Like, you did research on injuries or what can help,
I
cured,
had used it.
whatever.
No, I had used that on my horses all the time.
Oh yeah, though yeah, that makes
So
sense. Okay.
everyone
Okay.
worked, and it was available down there without a prescription or without a license. So
Uh,
I went to Tijuana and picked some up, and I used that on myself. And it's when you put it on your skin, your breath tastes like garlic immediately because it penetrates the skin,
whoa.
and it's very fast acting, but it can be used as an agent for anti-inflammatories.
That is so interesting. So I want to actually segue from buds you becoming a SEAL. And I actually want to talk about, I was doing some research and I found a little segment that I'd love for you to talk about further on an 8-day hike that you did across Greece.
Yes,
Yeah,
Sparta 300.
I don't know this part. Like, how did you end up doing this 8-day hike? And then I will get into my question.
When I left the service, when I retired, I was looking for something to really spark my fire, spark my interest. Um, and this event, I had seen the movie 300,
Mhm.
right? And I was looking for something to do that was somewhat difficult, but do it in an iconic location and do something that had transformed civilization or society. Because you have to think about when the Greeks decided that they were going to stop the Persians from coming in and invading Greece. Um, if they had not done that at that point in time, I mean, pretty much all of Europe would be speaking Farsi right now. Uh, so I looked at that on the map and decided that, hey, let's retrace that route. Let's go from Sparta, and we'll run and hike to Thermopylae, and it's 260 miles, and we'll do it over a week. And I'll get 10 people to go with me, 10 or 15 people. I think we had 15. And then we'll raise money for a worthwhile event while we're doing it. So it kind of checked all the blocks that I was looking for a target and some excitement to see the world and to do some good at the same time.
How did you get 10 to 15 people to join you?
You know, actually, it wasn't that hard. I started advertising for it, and a lot of former and active duty team guys like, hey, that sounds great. Let's go do that. And there were a few civilians, so that was the start of Epic Charity Challenge. And I started running one of those every year for a different worthwhile cause, a different nonprofit, and just finding different things to do in the world and going out and doing them. And after a while, if you're looking for people, you know what the mindset is, and people started registering for the next year without even knowing what the event was.
When I was listening to it, the story, you mentioned your feet was killing you, you're hurt, you're tired, but you see people who are worse than you and you start to help them. And when you do that, you stop thinking about yourself, right? You shut off that negative chatter that's going on in your mind. And I've touched upon this before in a couple of episodes where Coach Mack would always say, your teammate next to me is more important than you. And like I said, the first time I heard it, I was just like, it did not register. I was like, I'm important too, and I didn't understand it. And it took me a whole entire month for it to click and be like, oh my gosh. And it happened during when I was like absolutely freezing and soaking wet and miserable and purple. And I looked at the person next to me and they were the same. And when I focused on them and helped them get warm, suddenly everything was gone in terms of my own thoughts. And now that you're telling me this adventure happened after the teams, was this something that you learned over there? Was it something that it sounded like it was something you picked up right then and there, but I'm just curious on that process.
Well, I think it's part of a team mentality because if you're looking out for the person next to you, they're looking out for you and the person next to you, and everyone's looking out for each other. And when you do that, you take your mind off your own internal funk, your negative chatter, and the team does better itself. And then on these events, I mean, I had a couple of one Marine veteran who had lost his leg in an IED in Afghanistan. So he was an above the knee amputee, right? But he was leading the charge every day. And if you look at that, it's like guys would come up to me and say, "Hey, Lance, my knee's hurting," and I'd say, "Hey, why don't you go talk to Ferris and tell him your knee is hurting because he doesn't have a knee to hurt, and tell him how it feels and see what he says to you." And guys would go, "Well, maybe it's not hurting so bad after all," because they didn't want to do that. They could see that the situation could always be worse. We had another very good friend of mine, Kyle Maynard, on that trip, who was born with no arms and no legs. So we put Kyle on a bicycle, a hand crank bicycle that he used his nubs to pedal every day, and it was the equivalent of probably doing 5,000 or 6,000 pull-ups a day. But when people you see that and you're going, well, my foot hurts, but at least I have a foot to hurt. And Kyle does it. And Kyle's not bitching, so why should I bitch, right? So I called it a no bitching tour. That's what everyone, just looked at. They knew what those guys set the limits, and they set the bar high for going through what your perceived exertion limits are. One of the guys was a former Olympic decathlete, and his feet were raw. I mean, we took him to a doctor in one of the cities in Greece, and the doctor just looked at him and like, "What the hell have you been doing? You should never, you should rest for the next 2 weeks. Don't walk at all." So the next day, we taped his flip flops on him, and he ran for 25, 30 miles the next day carrying an American flag. So that's the kind of people that when you surround yourself with those people, it's easy to get stuff done. It really is.
You mentioned teams and the importance of teamwork. How was your team in BUD/S, and how was your team when you were a SEAL? Was there any bad teams, and how did you navigate and develop a strong team, or navigate like being in a not so strong team?
Yeah. I mean, you're going to have probably in a group of 15 guys, even if there are SEAL team members, you're going to have one or two who are not pulling their load at all times. And I think that's one great thing about being in an organization like SEAL teams or special operations in general, is you have to bring your A game every day. Because if you don't, the guys that are there are going to call you out, and they know what your strong points and weak points are. And that's one thing I really loved about being in the SEAL teams, was that guys would call you out and they would help you because you are in a platoon with them, and the success of that platoon is incremental to their success and your success. So guys are going to lean on each other when they have to, but they're going to reach out and coach and help others when they need to as well. So I found that sometimes when you have people who aren't putting their load, pulling it, you put them in a position of responsibility and make them responsible and make them accountable. And a lot of times that will bring their game up to what it should be without any further push or prod. They just need or require that little bit of responsibility and accountability, and that's why they're not performing up to standards. But when you hold them accountable and you give them something and you give them a mission and you give them a standard to adhere to, most of the time people will step up and they will come through for you. I found that out in many situations.
Did you ever find out a time when they did not come through?
I found that sometimes it takes longer with some than others, and that sometimes you have to do more for them. I guess a given point where you say, okay, I'm going to give this 5 days or 6 days, depending on the situation, depending on the urgency of it.
Mhm.
and work with them. And if they don't come through, then you have to take steps to either remove them from the team or find someone else who can do what they should be doing, but that doubles the workload on everyone else.
Now you said something interesting. You said, and work with them. So when you are having a weaker member on the team, you're not just telling them what to do or calling them out. You're also assisting them and being with what working with them. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone has got weak points. So
Mhm.
if you can find someone to mentor them, maybe it's not myself, maybe it's another member of the team who has a strong point that we're trying to develop in one team member. So we get them to help coach that guy. And the best thing he can do is just be like a sponge, and soak up that training and become better. And I think sometimes you need to discuss what the ramifications are if they don't step up to the plate and raise the bar on their performance. But you definitely need to help them out. You have to lead by example. And if you're giving someone an example to follow, that's what you are trying to adhere to, then they can see exactly what they need to do and give them all the tools for success.
When you were a buds instructor, we had Marty Strong on the show, and he was also a buds instructor.
Yeah, Marty's a great guy.
He was fantastic. And he said we would make bets and we would know like who's gonna quit and who's gonna make it through. What did you look for? When did you know? Like when you saw somebody and was like, they're gonna make it or they're not gonna make it? Or was there anyone that really surprised you and made it or quit that you didn't expect?
I think by the time that I was a year or 2 years, it was a 3-year tour for me. I could take a guy running across the grinder and I could call him over and I could ask him one question. And his answer to that question would tell me if he was going to be there in 6 months and graduate with the class, or if he was going to be a statistic and I'd see his bell, his helmet sitting at the bottom of the bell. And I had just one question to ask, and it was pretty simple.
What was it?
What was the question?
Yeah.
The question is, why are you here?
If they said what would be a strong answer where you would like, okay, or what would be a weak answer?
Whatever your answer is, and it could be positive or negative, you're either going toward a goal or you're could be running away from something. Say you're in a tunnel, you're going toward the light or you're going away from the darkness, one or the other. But if they cannot articulate in a 30-second elevator discussion why they're there, and if those feelings aren't tied to an emotion, a very strong emotion like love or hate, then it's just a matter of time before they either have to identify that why or they figure that they're better off somewhere else, that they haven't identified and it's not a strong enough reason to be there and to go through the beat down every day and to get up and do it again and again and again. So you have to be motivated, but you have to know why you're there. And it needs to be personal.
If you were to ask that question to 21-year-old you, what would be that answer?
My reply would be that, hey, I saw what some things can happen to people who become rudderless and without direction. I don't want to be that person. So there are reasons that you can identify that are either negative, that push you toward your goal, or they're positive and they draw you toward your goal. But whatever your reasons are, you need to wrap your head around that and come to terms with, because that's the only thing that's going to motivate you when you're tired, cold, wet, hungry. You're injured, you're behind enemy lines. You have to have a strong why. You have to have a motivation. It's something that's going to, it's a will to live. Why are you living? What's your purpose? You have to find it.
Did you have any, or when you were a SEAL, was there any stories that you have where it was pretty bad, where like you were like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it the next day, or I don't know if like, you were just, whether it was Mother Nature or a mission that you were on, that just something that, all your training had to kick in for survival and moving forward?
Well, a couple of times, yeah, you always have, and you look for those moments. You live for those moments, or else you'd be doing something else. We'd be up in Alaska, and I was in an ARC platoon, which we rode the ships over in the Western Pacific. But our first stop was in Alaska, and we did a hydrographic recon, which means we were in the water up in Sitka, Alaska, for probably an hour and a half or 2 hours doing a hydrographic recon. And I was the bitter end guy. So I was the first guy out with the line, and it stayed, and I kept it tight while everyone else was in increments and then taking hydrographic recon, taking soundings and stuff. Well, anyway, we were in the water probably for a good 2 hours and about maybe 40-degree water. It was just shy of slush in the ocean, but that was one point in time when you have to dig down deep and say, you know, um, I'm out here until the bitter end, and that's where I was. But
Now, did you know like it was gonna be like 1, 2 hours? Did you know like at all when you were gonna be able to get back in and have like a time frame, or it was just like, gosh, we don't know how long we're gonna be here?
I knew we had to do 1,000 yards of beach, 25 yards at a time. And every time the line said mark and we moved the line forward, that was one 25-yard segment out of about 1,000 that was done. So we got out when we were at 1,000 yards, and however long it took. And that's one thing that really comes to mind. When you're just as cold as you've ever been, and the bell's just too far away for you to ring out. So you're stuck there until you're finished. And I think putting yourself in situations like that bring a lot of clarity to things that you do later on in life. And every time you do that, you really stretch your boundaries and your limits, then they expand incrementally. So you can do that. You can do something else that's hard, and you can do something else that's even more difficult. So continually ramping up and stressing those boundaries are, I think, very important to doing things that other people will say, well, you tell them what you're going to do. Say, yeah, we're going to run 300 miles in 5 or 6 days. If they don't laugh when you tell them that, then you're probably not setting your limits high enough, and you need to rethink what you're about to do.
Now you mentioned that 8-day hike that you did over in Greece. It's like you were looking for something extreme. You were looking for some adventure stuff when you retired. Now, how was that transition period for you from SEAL to civilian life?
Well, I think doing these events really helped me in that transition. When I went from full-time SEAL to full-time civilian, um, I continued to look for those different events, the things that would make you push your boundaries and have a target. So doing the Epic Charity Challenge series and doing one or two events every year helps me with that. It helps me schedule out, my calendar and what I'm going to do and what I'm trying to do. I stayed involved with outrigger canoe racing and paddling, and doing different events. And then it helped me also by becoming more a better chiropractor. I started really concentrating on that with athletes and animals. So I became more involved with doing horses and dogs, the chiropractic. And that's a very rewarding field for me, just because there's no subjective area with them. They're better or they're not. Health wise, if you see a dog limping, you can make a positive impact and adjust your spine or adjust his appendages, and they're not limping anymore. Then that's positive impact for me. It just helps me move forward and do things that better. Just I guess have a more positive impact every day on something.
It seems like you always had a clear direction. Going to be a SEAL, and then after that, when you were, was it in the reserves or something? That's when you were going to college to get your doctorate, and then being a chiropractor, doing adventure races. It was like you always seemed to have a direction and a purpose that helped move you forward to not be stuck in those dark times. How did you develop that? And how did you know, was there ever dark times in terms of feeling like you didn't have a purpose or a direction? And how did you steer that ship to know, like, okay, now I'm going to go to chiropractor school. Okay, now I'm going to do adventure racing. And now I'm going to, give back and be working at a museum and developing this. Like, tell us more about that.
Any dark periods of time where you feel like you're a failure?
Yeah. Essentially, yeah.
I think that's honestly that's every day for me. I wake up and think that I haven't done enough somehow, and I want to do something better for someone, not just myself. Hopefully the rewards will come, but I think by looking outside yourself and helping other people, that will positively impact yourself, hopefully. So that's how I deal with those dark times.
Today's podcast episode is brought to you by my absolute favorite company. If you know me or seen videos or photos of me, then you know I always have one on my wrist. I absolutely adore this company. DiscoverOmnia.com. DiscoverOmnia.com is the world's first smart crystal bracelet. Every single bracelet is handmade in the USA using real genuine crystals made on memory wire. Every bracelet is unisex and they're also aromatherapy. The cool part is the black onyx charm that is on the bracelet. It scans to your cell phone, connecting you to their Wellness Hub Elevate. You can also access their Wellness Hub Elevate on your computer or tablet. You just have to sign into your account. The bracelet gives you a 12-month membership. It has over 200 pieces of self-care content, from motivational tips, meditations, breathing exercises around the theme of your bracelet, printable journals, and so much more. The content is ever growing. And that's not all. The bracelet also gives you lifetime access to their Elevate Together Club, which meets monthly via Zoom. Each month is themed to give you actionable takeaways to elevate your life. And with this podcast episode, you get 40% off your purchase order by using the code Mindset Podcast. Use that code Mindset Podcast for 40% off. Just go to DiscoverOmnia.com. DiscoverOmnia.com, code Mindset Podcast for 40% off. Get your bracelet today. How do you get over the doubts? Like, you seem to, like I said, after SEAL, like doing it, finding something to fulfill that adventure that you're now missing as a civilian, becoming a chiropractor and having a new profession in life. These are they're not something that the average person might strive to do, or that the average person does strive to do, but doesn't take it to more of an extreme like you seem to do. So have you ever had doubts with any of the choices that you made? How did you make that choice and then decide, okay, I'm going to see this through? And was ever any point you made a choice and then decided to pivot to go do something else?
Whoa, tough questions. You're digging deep here. I try to weigh all the options before making a decision or taking a direction. When I was in the teams, we would take an operation, and after the patrol leader would give a brief, we would sit down and do a murder board. And so we're going to pick this brief apart step by step and say, what could go wrong here? What could go wrong here? And what are we going to do if it does? And that way you're prepared for contingencies. You have a plan B, plan C, plan D if something does go wrong and you're not responding to the enemy. I think I try to murder board most of my decisions and then bounce them off my wife, my family for their input as well, because it not only impacts me, but it impacts them as well, especially financial decisions. So I try to do that with most of the important decisions. And if something does go wrong, then I've got a automatic response to it. And I'm not just reacting to something that has happened without at least an 80% plan.
Wow, that's very detailed. That's I mean it's probably something I should do. I make decisions very brashly, and then I look back and go, "What the heck was I thinking?" So that sounds like a way better plan. Have you ever had any doubts throughout it? Maybe that, you went to see the plan, you saw the things that were going to happen. Maybe there was something you didn't see, and you had some doubts. And how do you push past those doubts?
I did a podcast during the pandemic, COVID lockdown, and I think it was we were talking about how could how could companies have prevented some of the supply chain shortages and things like that. And I think it had they done a murder board like that, and had they looked at the different contingencies and seen, oh well, uh, like the United States looking at a majority of our pharmaceuticals are coming from China now. What's going to happen if we go to war with them, or we have a supply chain issue or a lockdown? Why do we get ourselves in those positions to begin with? Uh, and I think being a parent, you can almost see things happening with your kids. If they're doing something physically, or they're standing on the side of a ledge or at the top of a set of flight of stairs, you can almost foresee those things happening. I think using that sixth sense, I guess, is a way to prevent some of the negative stuff that could happen to you. Is just use your imagination and look and see what could go wrong. How do I prevent that? And what do I do if it does go wrong? So those are some of the things that I learned. I took from the teams, and then becoming a parent really changed my perspective entirely. I was on, I think, number 14 or 15th deployment when my kids were born. And it was the first one that I ever did. I was got deployed to Iraq, and I think they were 2 years old. Hardest one I ever did in my entire life. Not because of the op tempo or the mission or anything else. It's because I had to leave my family at home, and they were expecting me to come back. And everything that I did from that point on, during that deployment, hinged on not only bringing the team back, bringing my platoon back, but bringing myself back. So that makes the risk assessment a lot more, it brings it home a lot more. It makes it a lot more difficult for you, because now you're not volunteering for every mission. You're not just throwing it out there. If someone can't do something, then you're stepping up. You're assessing all the risk involved and addressing them with the point of mind that you have to bring yourself home for your family. And having those priorities in line are very, very good. I think they should be addressed. Everyone who goes overseas writes a letter and to be read by their family in case they don't come back, and sitting down and addressing and writing that letter is very self-analytical, right? But you keep that letter. I still have that letter, and I read it occasionally. I never showed it to my family, but it helps me bring into perspective my priorities in life. Does that make
That,
sense?
yeah, definitely. And that's a very heavy burden. Well, and it's not a burden, it's a choice that you make. And actually it's really a blessing that you get that. You get that family, and that the sacrifice that you end up making just by leaving them for that time period. It also has you thinking a lot, on I got to be home for my family. I got to be thinking about my family. How do you redirect it so it doesn't stop you from overthinking to the point of getting in the way of completing what you need to do?
Well, I think I've already checked off the blocks. I've written that letter. I know what needs to be done. Mission accomplishment is number one priority, bringing the guys home. Once you have all of those in perspective, it's pretty easy to go about doing what you need to do, because that is basically it's your mission line. It's your everything that you get tasked to do. It should all be justified by that one mission line that you have. So every company has a mission statement, right? And everything that you're due as a company or as a person, it has to be justified by that mission statement. So it makes it very simple. If what you're being asked to do doesn't take you toward the accomplishment of that mission statement, then obviously it's not high priority, it's not urgent, and maybe it's not justified in doing that. So
How
having that simple mission statement to guide you in life, and in the teams we have an ethos, and it really tells you how to be a good person, how to be a good teammate, and then that ethos is a guiding principle behind everything we do. It gives you integrity, it gives you trustworthiness, it tells you, how you need to be as a teammate, and having that ethos as a guiding statement, I suppose, is very important. So if you are somehow you question something that you've been asked to do or something you're about to do, and if you look at that ethos for guidance, and if it's not justified by that ethos, then it's a no-brainer. It's really, you shouldn't do it. And if you look at the different things we have in life, whether it be the Scout motto, the Bible, the SEAL ethos, there's a lot of guidance out there. You just have to look for it and decide what best fits you, and then what you're going to live toward.
What's your mission for life?
I just want to have a positive impact and leave a lasting impression on my family. I like to leave the world a better place than it was when I got here. So if the things that I'm being asked to do or I think about doing don't fit within that mission statement, then I guess my time is better spent doing something else.
How can us everyday civilians build up that mental toughness, that grit, to tap into some untapped potential? To maybe we are at home, we're on social media too much, we're watching TV, and we're not out there in the world, but we want to be. How can we take those steps to push ourselves to do something that we want to do, but just can't find the energy or to push forward?
Well, I don't know what an everyday civilian is, because every person is important, right? And it's how you think of yourself. The SEALs or special operations, they're no one special. They're just common people doing uncommon things uncommonly well, because that's what they train for. I would never think of anyone as just an everyday civilian. I mean, everyone should bring something to the table, no matter what. And I've seen people who you would not outwardly think that, okay, they have something that they contribute to a team. Case in point, we had an Air Force joint tactical controller assigned to our platoon one time. And the guy weighed probably 130 pounds soaking wet. And we were hiking at 10,000 feet, doing recon missions. And the guy just really couldn't keep up. Right? So we started carrying his water. We started carrying some of his ammunition just so he could keep up. Guys were starting to bitch about it. And it was like, oh, he's not keeping up with the team. He's not carrying his load. I said, we have to. He's part of the mission. He's part of our team, so we have to have him with us. It wasn't until the first time when we got ambushed in a very precarious position, and this guy gets on the radio and he's orchestrating aircraft overhead, 4 of them at a time, and they're dropping in danger close, and they're lighting up the enemy. This guy showed his worth right there, right? And then the next time we went out, guys were volunteering to carry his water, carry his ammo. Hey, you want me to take some extra food for you? But it just takes the situation to highlight what people bring to the table, right? And sometimes you just have to put them in that position, because after that, the guy could do no wrong. He showed us that he could get us out of tight situations, and he was the guy to do it, because no one else on that team would have done that at that level that he did. So I like to look at everyone brings something to the table. You just have to find it, put them in the right position, put them in the right area of responsibility, find out what they're good at, and let them thrive.
If
I hope
someone is like, yeah, if someone is lost and wants to find it within themselves, what would you suggest that they start to do to get themselves in motion?
look outside themselves, find something that's going to help someone else. Be a volunteer. I'm a history buff, so I like to volunteer for Honor Flight San Diego. Next weekend, we're taking a plane load of SEAL Vietnam veterans to Washington, D.C. And to me, there is probably no higher mission than taking someone back to where they came from, and allowing them to walk with the same teammates in a place that is revered. So we're going to go to the Vietnam Wall, and they're going to be very emotional about it. But that's part of, I look outside myself and I find missions like that. And it's very easy to find the energy and the time to do that. I know a lot of very successful people who they have successful companies, but where they get their energy and their motivation and their challenges from is looking outside at volunteer situations and figuring out how they can help others using their resources, and then helping others figure out what they can do better, or how they can, I guess, live what's left of their life in a much better situation. So volunteer, find something outside yourself that will bring others joy and excitement, and you'll receive much more than you'll give. I found that to be true.
Thank you so much. This was a great, and I really enjoyed this, and I thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, I think you're doing a very good thing for a lot of people, and spreading a positive word. And then if you could just make a positive impact on one person, I think it makes it all worth it, no matter what. So I appreciate you, interviewing some great people. I've worked with a lot of the team guys that you interviewed before, and love them all.
Thank
Johnny
you.
Mack and I go way back, and we've had some good times together. But
Yeah, he was the SEAL that trained me. Without him, none of this would be.
right,
You guys all inspire me, and one of the reasons why I do this is because I get inspired every single time I finish an interview, and I take what you guys say and I put it to the test. I am gonna go out and volunteer. I'm gonna go do something that's beyond me, and I'm gonna see how it all goes. And then I journal about it. I have a little mini episode for the Patreons called Field Notes. So I talk about the lessons that you give, and then I go out into the field, I put it to the test, and then I come back and I talk about it. And sometimes most of the time, it's become so life-changing that it becomes an everyday part of me. And even something so simple like Kyle Bucket just said, just execute. Like sometimes you just got to stop, think, and just execute. And I used to overthink everything. And in the mornings, I take a freezing cold shower. And when I was first doing it, before the just execute. I mean, take me like 30 minutes to get in there. It's like, but you're getting in there anyway. So like, just get in. And then the just execute, it was just like, execute, just go. Don't even think. The more you think, the worse it is. And now it's just like the moment the water goes on, I'm in there. I'm in there before it goes on because I know it's coming. So the things that you guys say really inspire me to become a better version of myself on the daily. So I'm just beyond grateful to be able to talk to you and get inspired by you. And I really hope it does the same for our listeners.
Right on. Yeah. And just, stand there and then turn the water on. All right. Don't think about it. Don't look at it.
That's what I started doing. It's game changer. But thanks again. I really enjoyed talking with you. And for everyone that's listening, please go like, share, comment, subscribe, become a Patreon member so you get access to all of our bonus episodes like field notes that I was just talking about. And tune in next week for our next episode. Thank you for listening.